So thank you so much for joining us. This is the first community engagement meeting for the new South Jeffco Library site. We have a great evening in store for you, about an hour and a half of overall meeting. Most of that is actually going to be hearing from you all. The purpose of this evening is to share what we know so far and hear as much from you as possible. If we want to advance to the next slide. My name is Jay Rankins. I am a principal and director of Denver area operations with MIG. We're a planning and design firm, but we also specialize in public participation. So we're really excited to support the county in this effort and importantly, the community in sort of navigating to a solution that's going to work for everybody. We're joined tonight by our presenters, Tom Hovey, who's the director of Jefferson County Open Space, and Donna Walker, our executive director of Jefferson County Public Libraries. Next slide. So this evening, what we want to do is provide you a couple of slides just on the overview of this evening's meeting. As you can, maybe you can hear, I know I can. We have some folks still joining. Hopefully, as we're kind of leaning into this, that gives our folks a chance to join. We then want to provide a little bit of background, level setting, making sure that everyone has the right information so they can provide informed input on this process this evening and moving forward. And so we're going to give a little bit of an oversight on policy, site, and process. Tom will be walking us through that. Donna's going to talk about library services, some of the work that has been done previously, looking at the needs around a new library, and some of the work leading into tonight's meeting. And then Tom's going to provide us an overview of the library proposal. And then we're going to do some polling. We're going to do some polling up front here as well to kind of get folks familiar with the polling exercise, as well as to get a handle on who's in attendance this evening. But then we'll close the presentation portion with polling and then really open it up to commenting, which will be done via the chat. I'll talk about that in just a second. We'll wrap up the meeting around 7:30 with some next steps. And again, this is just the beginning of the discussion. Again, the purpose for anyone who has joined in the last minute or two and maybe didn't hear that is really to share with you what we know to this point and hear from you as much as possible this evening about your interests, your concerns, what you like, what you don't like, so that we can come back to you with the information regarding that. Next slide. All right. So our meeting is going to be recorded this evening. So just want to make everyone aware of that. We want to make sure that folks are going to listen to each other, to our presenters, and provide respectful input. Nothing is determined at this point. So we really want to make sure that we're hearing the good, the bad, the ugly through this, but we don't want to be bad and ugly to each other, importantly. So if we can all be respectful of each other, that would be really appreciated. We want to use the chat this evening. We have quite a few people. I'm seeing over, I think, 100 at this point. So we're going to rely on the chat for you all to provide comments. The chat will be turned on after the presentation. So if you have thoughts, ideas, comments, questions as the presentation is happening, please jot those down. We want to hear those. We just want to make sure that everyone's able to focus on the presentation, and then we receive those comments and questions afterwards. And we will allow some of the presenters, and we have other staff from Jefferson County Libraries, from Open Space, and from MIG as well, that may chime in and respond to some of those questions. Mentimeter, we're going to use that again as for some polling. That's menti.com. We're going to show that information when we get to that portion of the meeting. But if anyone who wants to navigate to that now, you feel free to do so. You can do that on your phone, on your tablet, or on a separate browser if you'd like. And then finally, the team features. We do have closed captioning. There's a translation function available as well, and chat function. So the chat, you should be able to see with the little bubble above chat, and on mine, it's up on the top. So that would be the way to provide chat. Once we get to that portion of the meeting, I'll alert everyone when that is available, that functionality. The ability to produce closed captioning, as well as looking at a transcript of the meeting, so on and so forth. You can go to the three little dots with more written right below it, and there's an ability to look at that. You can also kind of rearrange your screen there, but again, importantly, the closed captioning, the transcription is there as well. Next slide. And Tom, I'm going to turn over to you to hit a few givens here.
Great. Thank you, Jay. Good evening, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us tonight to talk about this proposal. I just wanted to give an overview of some of the givens. These are things that we will be steadfast on as we move through this process. As many of you saw in the release we did about these meetings, we understand how valued this site is as a sledding hill. And first, that's why it's our first given that whatever happens here, the sledding hill needs to be either enhanced or not impacted. And that may happen in a variety of different ways. Secondly, in our discussions of the library, we want this to be, if this occurs, to have shared parking, restroom facilities, which the site currently does not have, and park-like outdoor amenities that really transition from the library to those outdoor amenities to the natural open space. And you'll see a little bit more of that later. Also want to see some trails that would connect to this site from parks and schools and neighborhoods in the area. And then certainly want to make sure that any kind of transfer or sale of the property would meet all of our criteria, our criteria and our process. And then lastly, and we put this here because we want to be clear and don't want there to be any confusion, the Columbine Library will remain, and that the library, Jefferson County Public Library, has established that there is a need for a new library to serve the south part of the county, and you'll hear more about that from Donna in a few moments. So I'll turn it back over to you, Jay.
Great, thanks, Tom. All right, so on the next slide, what we have is a couple different options for accessing the Menti polling. So on the very top of the slide, and repeated on the left-hand slide in a little larger font, is the link and the code to enter. You can also use your phone, or again, as I mentioned, a tablet, if you have a camera function on there, to use the QR code. The idea here is we're going to do a few polling questions to get a sense of who we have in attendance this evening. And then we'll actually circle back to that after the presentation and then close the meeting with a question as well. So as you navigate to menti.com, menti.com, you can enter the code 20850759. And then I would encourage you to keep that up. It will advance to the questions as we navigate through that. So you will not see a question right up front. So you'll get that in just a second. So we'll just give the folks a moment to navigate to there. Again, the information as we have polling questions will be on the top of each slide, and I can call that out for folks as well. So it looks like we have 29 people have navigated there so far. And again, I think we have, well, I'm seeing 113 participants. So we'll give it a little bit of time. Chris, I think we can advance to the next slide and go to that first question. And we'll leave this one up for a little longer than the others. But we're asking, what community do you live in? So if you can type that in, you can use your neighborhood name, the HOA, maybe it's a portion of the community that you live in. So we're seeing Ken Carroll Ranch, Meadow Sanctuary, Williamsburg. This is a word cloud. I think most people are probably familiar with these, but the word cloud, the more answers that we get, we end up seeing that in the larger print. So Williamsburg is popping up, Meadows, Sanctuary, as being one of the more, or a couple of the more frequent answers. We're also seeing Sanctuary Meadows, Grant Ranch, North Ranch at Ken Carroll, Bomar, Fairway Vista, Columbine Knolls, Boulder, great, Canterbury, Columbine Knolls again. So it looks like most folks so far, at least of our, it looks like 59 people have interacted with this, or 60 now. Williamsburg, Meadow Sanctuary, Stony Creek, followed by Columbine Knolls, Ken Carroll Ranch, Littleton, great, awesome. So we have a pretty big distribution of folks. Cattail in the Meadows, the Meadow Sanctuary, someone put the in front, so it counted as a different one. Ken Carroll and Garrison. Great. Dutch Ridge Columbine. So we'll give it a few more moments. We have about 66 of our participants have engaged with the Mentimeter. We'll see if anyone else wants to jump in here. All right, we got one more. So I think we can advance, Chris, to the next one. Great. So one of the things that we were hoping to learn about everyone in attendance is we know that the Sledding Hill Park is really beloved for sledding. So we want to know how you and your family or perhaps your household currently use the park. And you can select all that apply here. So an obvious one would be to go sledding, of course, but we know that some folks are using the park for other winter activities. Obviously, we don't have winter year-round, so maybe you're using the park for other non-winter activities, and maybe there's other, or maybe none of the above. So we'll reveal this as we get closer to that 66 number, which it seems like is the number of participants in the Menti currently. And again, you can check all that apply on this one. All right, we'll just give it another moment or two. We're approaching that 66, 67 number. All right, Chris, if you can reveal that result. Okay, so we have 42 people of our 70 respondents. And again, people could say more than one, so this is going to add up to way more than 70. But we have go sledding. We have 22 for other winter activities, 26 for non-winter activities, 27 indicated other, 28 now, and then 19 were none of the above. Great, and we're up to 72 participants in the Menti. If you want to go to the next slide, Chris. All right, so thinking about library services, again, Jeffco libraries are, some of the best around the region, very beloved by the community. We want to know, how often do you and your family currently use the libraries? So this would be any library services around the area, Jefferson County libraries in particular. So weekly, monthly, several times a year, once or twice per year, or never. And again, just getting a sense of who participate or who is participating in the meeting this evening. All right, really quick responses. Thank you, everybody. We're up above 70 again. So Chris, I think you can reveal the results here. All right, wow. So 40% of our participants, at least in the polling, and indicated that it's weekly that they're participating or attending going to the library. 17% monthly, 11% several times a year, 12% once or twice per year, and then looks like it's fluctuating a little bit because we're getting a few more people participating, but about 18% are never using library services. All right. Next slide. All right, so with that, I'm going to turn it back over to Tom for our presentation focusing on policy first.
Great. Thanks again, Jay. I wanted to just provide a little bit of background to folks about our land transfer policy. First and foremost, we receive proposals from time to time for land exchanges, for land purchases, for a variety of different purposes, and we evaluate those with using a number of different criteria. Uh, we, in particular, are really only interested in transfers that are going to be very beneficial to either Jefferson County open space or the community. And that is the case here with a community facility. Uh, so first and foremost, we look at the proposal and determine whether it's going to provide those kind of benefits, whether they're ecological, recreation, or cultural benefits. We then can establish a value of the property using two different methods. Our real estate team can value that property using a variety of current property sale data, or we can agree to perform an appraisal on the property. In this case, um, the library and Jefferson County Open Space have agreed to use the staff analysis method. We have done that analysis and determined that if the library were to purchase 6 acres of land, the value of that would be $2 million. That's about $7.65 a square foot. Donna's nodding her head, hoping it would be $6, but no, it's $7.65 a square foot. And that number would be applied to, if this were to move ahead, whatever square footage the library would need for this property. These kind of proposals, if they were over 5 acres, of course, all of them go to our Open Space Advisory Committee. It's a group of 10 community members that are appointed by the Board of County Commissioners. If the transfer were over 5 acres, it would require a supermajority support recommendation by the committee to the Board of County Commissioners. And then, of course, any real estate transactions that we do are approved by the Board of County Commissioners. I just wanted to give you that bit of background about our policy on land transfers. So next slide, please. So importantly here, we are looking, if we were to move ahead with this proposal, we would like to reinvest every dollar we receive from the library locally. And what that would mean that Jefferson County Open Space would not receive any of the proceeds from this land transfer, that $2 million that I mentioned earlier, or up to that amount. We would, to incentivize the library to do things that are more park-like, we would give them up to 50% credit for very specific park and trail amenities that they might build on site or they might build off site and associated with the construction of the library. So this would be things like playgrounds, trail connections, again, to local parks and neighborhoods and schools, botanic garden displays that might give people a sense of how they might do xeric treatments on their own properties, educational features that we deem to be more park related than library related. So we have a number of items that we have listed that we've identified that would be eligible for this credit. We have vetted both of those both with the Ken Carroll Metropolitan District staff and the Foothills Park and Recreation District staff. Any remaining proceeds up to that would be after credits to the library would be split between the Foothills Park and Recreation District and the Ken Carroll Metro District. And we would hope that those entities would invest in local parks. We've had some discussions with Foothills. They think they would likely invest those funds at Eagle Meadows Park, which is just west of here. And with Ken Carroll, they would likely invest those funds at the Ken Carroll Community Park, which is just south of this location off of Kipling. So again, there is no proceeds that would come to Jefferson County Open Space. We would reinvest those in local parks and trails. So next slide, please. So let's talk a little bit about the park and the property itself. It's 29.6 acres. We acquired in 1999, primarily for what it's being used for today. It does have an official development plan that was established in 1976. It's the Meadows Official Development Plan. And that allows for a variety of community uses, open space recreation, which does include libraries in our planning and zoning regulations. Also noteworthy is that in the Jeffco comprehensive plan, there's a goal to promote shared use and compatible uses with certainly the appropriate design and site selection. And lastly, pretty much immediately after we acquired this property in 1999, we leased it to the Foothills Park and Recreation District, and they've been our partners in managing this property literally since we purchased it. So next slide, please. So there's a few things that we just want to walk through here, and that there's work that's already been done here by Jefferson County Public Library, and Donna's going to talk about that in a moment. So the first piece, can I have the next slide, please, is the community input on library services. Donna's going to, again, talk about that in a moment. The next piece, next slide, please, is this community input on the location. So the library has already done work on the need for services. Now we're talking about the location. And then next slide, please. In the future, there would be community input on the library site approvals, and that would be with the Open Space Advisory Committee, the library trustees, the Board of County Commissioners, the Foothills Park and Recreation District Board, and the Ken Carroll Ranch Metro District Board. So next slide, please. So this is really the process in all. We recognize that there's a lot of print here. That's one of the reasons that we're recording this meeting. This graphic will be available on our website in a separate PDF, so you can print it out and look at it yourself, but it really highlights what's happened in the past, what we're doing now, the opportunities for public comment now, and what would happen in the future if this moved ahead, and the opportunities for public comment in those endeavors. So next slide, please. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Donna, and she's going to talk to you about the work the libraries have already done.
Thank you, Tom, and thank you everybody for being here today. I really appreciate your time. So so I'm going to talk about the South Jeffco Library Services and our site selection process. And right now, we'll talk about the identified need for a new library, the mill levy vote, how we're funding this, the community input we've received, and then how that led it to this proposal in front of us today. So the area we're talking about, it has seen tremendous population growth from the past to the current. When the Columbine Library was built in the late 1980s, about 1988, there about 60,000 people lived in this area of the county, and now more than double that number of people live here. the entire geographic area that we're talking about is currently served by that one branch, our one branch of Columbine Library. So population growth and forecasted growth, which isn't, like this, it's just steady population growth for this part of the county. Those are major indicators for us of a need for another library branch in this region. So when we're talking about need, our intent is to create a library for the future, a third place for all generations to connect and discover and create that's closer and more convenient for people who live more south and west of the Columbine Library branch. So let's talk a little bit about how we're funding this. So back in November of 2015, the library went to the voters of Jefferson County to ask for a little bit higher mill levy and a dedicated mill levy to help fund lots of things. And one of those promises was a promise to expand library services into underserved areas. So we did add a bookmobile, a stop at Ken Carroll and Schaefer as a temporary measure. We added a lending machine and hold pickup lockers at the Ridge Center while we developed our plans and also saved money for a new library. So this project is fully funded by the library in our budget and is fulfilling a promise we made back in November 2015. So if we talk a little bit about the community input process then, we have had quite a bit of community input, and the community input has been on what people want to see, people who live in that area of the county, in this area of the county, want to see in a new library. We reached out to lots of leaders in the community. We also had meetings. We had community meetings, virtual community meetings. We had an online survey in English and Spanish. We had over 1,400 people in the community engage in that process. And from there, we had a report out that showed what those services the community was interested in having in a library. And so we have that in a report you can see on our website. So once we heard that from the community, then it helps us then with our next step, which is around our site selection and site selection criteria. So that's what we'll talk about next. When we talk about our site selection criteria, you see there some things like location, convenience, and size. So those are some of the things that we look at and our board asks us to look at. So what can fit and where should it be? Those kinds of things. So one thing we know is that we want this library to have a convenient location on major cross streets, visible to the community, not tucked into a neighborhood where it's hard to see and hard to get to. We want it to be on people's errand routes. One of the things we learned in the community engagement, we've got heat maps from people around what those errand routes are, not just errands, but where they go to school or work or places of worship, things like that. And when we heard what the community wanted to see in their new library, we learned that we needed to build about a 40,000 square foot library. And that size library with the parking that needs to go with that takes about 5 to 6 acres of land. So that's the kind of criteria we're talking about. Then our search area, then the boundaries, when we look at this proposal in front of the community today, our search boundaries are essentially, just for simplicity's sake, are inside of C470 and south of coal mine. If you can picture that part of our community, and if you can picture that part of our community, you can know that that's a difficult area to find something that's 5 or 6 acres. We used a commercial realtor. We spoke to community leaders and looked at many sites to see what might fit this criteria for us. And another element of our site selection was that we wanted to be in partnership with another community agency to see there that bullet to improve community services. We also wanted to maximize the value to the taxpayers of Jefferson County. We feel like this particular site can create a year-round amenity to serve all ages and stages of life. So that search brought us to this point in our conversation, this particular site and this proposal that's in front of us today. Thank you, Tom.
Thanks, Donna. Next slide, please. So that brings us to the proposal that the library approached us with, and that is consideration of using a portion of Sledding Hill Park at roughly the intersection of Kipling and Ken Carroll Avenue. Next slide, please. So I want to preface this slide by saying the library, when they approached us, wanted to see how this might fit the program that they have for the library. And they asked their architect to do a cursory study to see how a building would fit in, parking, stormwater quality facilities, and the like. And so I want to emphasize that this is that study, but it is by no means how this might lay out or a final plan of by any means. So the library is looking at a 40,000 square foot, one level building. So just to give you a sense, the Columbine Library is 30,000 square feet. So that'd be about 25% larger here. So, and that footprint is just short of an acre. So the building itself is just short of an acre. And ideally, as Donna said, the library would like to have be located at those main crossroads, which of course Kipling and Ken Carroll are. They've also identified 165 parking spaces. And you recall I said earlier that that was one of the givens, that would be shared parking. So there's currently 46 spaces that are shown there to the north of this. And so this would pretty much triple the parking, and that would be used for both the park and the library. And then you see the green space that I talked about a little bit earlier that would be intended to have those park-like amenities or park amenities that would transition from the library building out into the open space area that's currently been primarily used for sledding. So this gives you a sense. So the inside dash line that you see represents about 4.5 acres, and the outside dash line represents 6 acres. And that blue polygon that you see there might be something that's used for stormwater that would be required for the hard impermeable surface on the parking area. So again, the hope is that it transitions from, in other words, from the built environment, the library, to the natural environment, the open space, with this transitional space in between. So next slide, please. So these are just a couple of images. We like to refer to these as storyboards of what could happen at the sites. Things like the lobby of the library facing west and engaging people and inviting people to the outdoor space and the open space to the west. Of course, the sledding that everybody treasures this site for. Things like park benches and children's nature play areas that you see in the upper right and lower left. And then in the lower part of the screen, you see a couple of slides that are from the Durango Library, which is really unique project where the library that's adjacent to the Animas River Trail did this xeric botanic garden display. They actually formed a botanic society that helped create this and maintains this, and would be an excellent opportunity at this site to be able to show people what they might be able to do in their own yards, particularly in the midst of the climate change we're experiencing and the droughts we're seeing these days. And then lastly, some potential of some outdoor spaces that could be used for experiential learning and just enjoying the outdoors. So just a little bit of a storyboard, some imagery to give you a sense of what we might be talking about in that transitional space between the library and the open space. And these are some of the things that we might give the library credit for that I mentioned earlier. So next slide, please. So
Great.
with that, I'm going to turn it back to Jay. Thanks, Jay.
Awesome. Thanks, Tom. And thank you, Donna. Great information, lot of information. We want to acknowledge that. So again, we're going to do a few Mentimeter questions here, and then we're going to turn on the chat and allow folks to comment, to provide questions, and we'll turn to Tom and Donna to answer as many of those as are appropriate this evening, anything that we have answers to. But again, we're really relying on this evening, and then any comments that are provided in the sort of interim between this meeting and our next meeting in late September to hear what the community's concerns are, kind of vet this, really test it, kick the tires on this idea, and see if we can come back with some ideas to either address those concerns or take advantage of the opportunities that are highlighted. So a few questions here, and then we'll turn on that chat. So again, menti.com, it looks like 19 people have kind of navigated back to there. If you do have it up still, that's great as well, but you can use the QR code. You can use menti.com with the code 20850759. And let's advance to that first of our next set of questions. All right, so if this proposal were to move forward, again, just to reiterate, it is not a done deal. We are really looking for input from the community on this. And then also want to respect all the process that's happened to date as well. But if it were to move forward, what aspects do you feel are the highest priorities? So select all that apply here. So we have enhancing, preserving sledding, year-round outdoor and park amenities, trail connectivity, library services, shared parking, or other. So again, some of these exist today, like sledding, of course. Most of these would be part of implementing the proposal. So again, if it were to move forward, what do you think the priorities would be? So it looks like we're up to almost to our 70 number again, 66, 69, 70. Great. I think we might even have a few more people who interact with the Menti this time. So Chris, if you don't mind sharing those results. Okay, so the majority, or I guess the biggest number, I won't say majority, that would be wrong. But the biggest number is enhancing, preserving sledding, followed by library services. Closely on the heels would be year-round outdoor park amenities. Shared parking isn't a big one as well. I know that the existing parking that Tom mentioned can definitely fill up, so shared parking would be a benefit. Trail connectivity. So there currently are no formal trails, so that's definitely a potential as well. And then other. So once we turn the chat on, that might be one where we want to hear from folks on what some of those other ideas are that you'd want to see incorporated. All right, so we're up to about 79 people. If you want to go to the next question, Chris. All right, so whether or not you answered other to the last question, what other aspects of this proposal do you think should be considered? So we mentioned trails, we mentioned shared parking, the library, some park-like amenities. Are there other things that come to mind for you in terms of if the county is going to make an investment in this property, if there's a transaction on the property, the library is designed and constructed, We're improving some of that open space, as Tom mentioned. What other things would come to mind? So traffic looks like a big, I don't think that, I guess it's something that should be considered, not something that we're, desiring, it would be my guess. Leave the open space alone, someone said. Views being important to folks, keeping the open space in natural areas. Again, we're talking about 6 acres of just under 30 acres, so much of that could remain open space, but someone said just keep it or leave it alone altogether. Traffic again, bike park was mentioned as an additional idea. Future mill levies, so thinking about the taxation that might be associated with this. Access from northbound Kipling, median is in the way. Security and safety, libraries attract homeless and noise, which will directly affect the neighborhood behind it. Bathroom at the sledding hill. If the library was there, a warm-up spot, I think that is for sledders. So sort of a warming area, bathroom access. Water runoff to the creek. So really thinking about the pervious and impervious surfaces that might be created through improvements to the property. The environment, fiber internet, traffic patterns again, a really big concern I think here. Effects on land value for surrounding homes. Cost to taxpayers, so again, the future mill levies. Mowing the sledding area. Someone said that they love the xeriscaping idea that Tom had mentioned. I think that was in relation to the Durango example that was mentioned. Leave it alone. Columbine is too close. So sort of a thought that maybe the library is in too close a proximity. So maybe that's something Donna can speak to in a few moments. A safe way to turn into the parking lot from Kipling. So not only just traffic, perhaps, but what does that mean actually accessing the site? I think until we'd get further into design, that would be tough to sort of identify, but so definitely something that we can maybe have the architecture team look at in the interim to see if there is a safe way to do that. Leveling the land, how will that happen? Also concerned about this paving the way for future sales of the rest of the land. So sort of that idea that maybe this is a slippery slope. If we're selling off open space now, what does that mean for the rest of this open space and other open space? Something that Tom can probably speak to. Open space is getting limited in this area. New homes proposals popping up daily. All right, great. So ton of great information here. I do want to let you know that we're going to be downloading the Mentimeter input here, as well as all the chat as soon as we open that up in just a couple of moments. And then summarizing that, posting on the website, and then again, in that future meeting, which we'll talk about at the end of the meeting, we'll want to respond to as many of those as possible. Someone said undesired crowds, view on arriving, southbound traffic, walking trails, no degradation of the open space. Add a bathroom if needed, but leave the rest alone. Again, someone said don't need another library. It's a dying breed. I bet Donna has a few thoughts about that. Someone asked about the soil being tested. Great. Okay, so let's move on to the next question. I think we just have one or two more here. What are your concerns about this proposal? I think we heard a lot on the last one, but this is a multiple choice. So if you can indulge us here, impacts to sledding, decreased open space. It sounded like a lot of people were, or several people had voiced that. Increased traffic and associated noise. I'm guessing that one's going to pop up. And you can do all that apply here again. Visual impacts of the library building itself. So right now, there's no building on this particular property. So if you have a concern about the visual impacts to wildlife, and then particularly maybe the prairie dogs, other, and if you don't have any concerns, we'd like to hear that too. So we're getting up there, 66, 67. So Chris, if you want to reveal this one. All right, so just as it kind of reflected that last question, maybe not too surprising to anybody, the decrease in open space and increased traffic. and we kind of combine that with associated noise, is jump into the top with 50 and 49. Then we have impacts to wildlife and the prairie dogs, other, which I'm assuming several of those were mentioned in that last question, but we'd encourage you to throw that in the chat here as soon as we open that. I think we have one more Mentimeter question here. Impacts to sledding, tied with the visual impacts, and then 19 of our 83 respondents have said don't have any concerns. So quite a few folks, the vast majority, do have some concerns of some sort. Next slide. All right, so last one here, whether or not you answered other to that last question, what are your other concerns? Again, I think some of this is going to be probably a little repetitive from that question 2 ago. But if you don't mind, we won't stay as long on this one. We'll open up the chat in a moment. I just want to see if there's any new things that come in. So a few folks have said none. We have prairie dogs. Someone said deeply concerned about number of neighbors who think libraries are unnecessary. So it'll be good to hear a little bit more about that. I think there's a couple different ways to interpret that. Library needs to be further south and perhaps also further west. Views, again, the proximity of the library, particular to the Columbine Library. Security in local neighborhoods. So again, that idea of new people may be coming to the library and what that means for the neighborhoods. Don't need a new library so close. A complete waste of taxpayer money, someone said. Homeless people who will be in our neighborhood. Decreased open space. Okay, so a lot of the same concerns, not too surprising from the one we had a couple of times ago. Someone said add xeriscaping around the building, so I think that one is assuming that it would happen, making sure that there's xeriscaping. Concern about the lack of intelligence, the people against libraries, ridiculous. No concerns, let's go. Let's just pull the trigger on this. Way too close again. So this idea that the proximity of the library. So Donna, if you can kind of be ready to speak to that. I think that's a common theme we're hearing already. Couple different suggestions about location. Someone said ruining a family fun winter activity. So Tom, I'd really love for you to be able to speak to how sledding would continue to happen or could continue to happen if this moved forward. All right. Use an already developed space, leave the open space. Library should be further south again. Long overdue, someone said. So some mixed feelings about the proposal itself. All right, so I think that was our last question, Chris. Is that right? If you want to advance. Oh, yep, one more, sorry. Last one here, and then we're going to open up the chat. Given what you have learned and heard, what are your hopes relative to this proposal? So we're going to ask this question right now. Then we're going to open up the chat. I'm guessing we'll hear even more in the chat. And then we'll sort of regarding some of those themes that we were just hearing. We'll get some answers from Tom and Donna if any other staff want to chime in. And we're going to ask it again as well, just FYI, right before we close the meeting to see if any sort of feelings or sentiments shift. But the first answer is it happens and it becomes an incredible community amenity. Next is I'm undecided, but I want it to go through or to be thoroughly evaluated and be responsive to community input. And the third option is it doesn't happen and the park stays as is. Again, just to get a sense of who we have with us this evening, I do want to reiterate, this is one of many inputs. Obviously, hearing from our community in a forum like this is really important, but we know that not everyone can participate, maybe this evening or at this time. So we're going to provide other opportunities for people to provide input moving forward. And then circle back with everybody with those, again, key themes, questions to those, or answers to those questions, and looking at how this could move forward, if it should move forward. So we have about 81 people responded. So if you want to reveal that one, Chris. All right, so of the people in attendance this evening, it looks like 38% or 37. It's adjusting just a little bit, I think, as a few more people respond. Want it to happen, think it'd be great for the community. We have 14% kind of in the middle. They're undecided, but hoping that it goes through this, kind of thorough vetting process. And then just under half, 48%, don't want it to happen, want the park to stay as it is. All right. So with that, we're going to open up the chat for questions and comments. And I think just based on all of those different comments that we received in the Mentimeter, we'll jump right in. As we're turning on the chat, Tom, if you wouldn't mind speaking to perhaps maybe to start out, how sledding would continue to happen, how much space perhaps is used for sledding, and how that might actually be enhanced through a proposal such as this.
Thanks, Jay. A couple of things here. The location that we showed you for the library, most of the sledding occurs to the west of that 6-acre area. The enhancements to sledding could come in a variety of different forms, and I'll just start on what we call the arrival sequence, and that is, and several of you mentioned this, is good access off of Kipling, and then quite a bit more parking, as you might imagine, on those days where we have snow conditions. The park's going to be really popular. The library perhaps a little bit less so. So there's very complementary uses there. And then several of you mentioned warming hot restrooms, those kind of things. We did look at that and trying to look at it from a really practical standpoint. What we're looking at is having the library, the lobby of the library face the sledding hill, so that folks could come into the library, use that lobby area as a warming hut, and then have restrooms located in that lobby that would be public restrooms available, at least during the library hours, which is quite an improvement. And I think we all know what a big deal restrooms are. We know that one of the first things that people do when they arrive in one of our parks is use the restroom facilities. So they're very important, especially if you're there playing in the snow with kids.
Great, thanks, Tom. One other quick thing, Tom, I want to toss it over to Donna as well, but there's a pretty technical question in the chat, particularly about the land transfer originally to Jefferson County Open Space of the Sledding Hill property, and just whether or not there were any restrictions on the use of that open space.
The restrictions would be around using it for park and open space purposes, and that's obviously what it's been used for. Again, this would constitute a transfer of that use, and so that's why we're going through this process here, is to really evaluate that. That said, there are a number of examples, hundreds, probably thousands of examples around the country where libraries are adjacent to public parks. I think, as Donna said in our news release, parks and libraries go hand in hand, and we couldn't agree more. In fact, the Columbine Library is completely surrounded by Clement Park. I think some of us wish that back in the day that would have been a more integrated use, and that's certainly what we would shoot for here.
Great, thank you, Tom. Donna, maybe I have a couple for you actually. The first, I think, would be more globally. That one that came in earlier about sort of that, what is the future of libraries? I'm sure it's something that you've thought a lot about. So just maybe some your thoughts on, Jefferson County libraries, the use, is that evolving at all? And do we in fact have a need for additional libraries in the area.
Well, thank you. I appreciate the opportunity to respond to that. So some people don't use the library. We know that. And sometimes people who don't use the library don't know how others are using the library. So the library has evolved quite a bit since the advent of the internet and digital materials. And the library is very well used. When I speak of the library in general, Jefferson County Public Library is actually one of the best used libraries in the country for libraries like ours in communities like ours in terms of visits to the library, use of the physical collection of materials, which both those things take space and a branch, a physical space, as well as total use of all the materials, including the digital materials, program attendance, things like that. So people use the library for all kinds of things. They might use it for a meeting space or for a study room, a place for doing homework or meeting with a colleague for a work situation. The library continues to evolve in general, the public library and Jefferson County Public Library. We are creating libraries for the future. For the many people who do, about half the households in Jefferson County right now use the library regularly. So that's, if that helps people understand, if they're not a library user or think they're obsolete, about half of your neighbors in Jefferson County in terms of households actually use the library. And we saw from our poll that many of the people here today use the library very regularly. So I guess I would say that if you haven't been to a library in a while, you might stop in and see what we have, including our website, to see that's also part of our library service, and see who's using the library and what they're doing.
Great, thanks. And Donna, another one for you. I'm seeing several things in the chat. It came in earlier about this location in particular. It seems like there's a theme of thinking about something further away from the Columbine Library. So if you can, I don't know, you mentioned that there's documentation available on the website, kind of alluding to or sort of um, describing the selection process or the vetting, but if you can just speak to that proximity and how it may or may not make sense to have this location in relation to the Columbine Library.
Thank you, Jay, and thank you for the question. That are the questions, all the questions that are coming through in the chat. So this entire geographic area is underserved when it comes to library services. And so for us, south and west of Columbine is a good location. We have particular boundaries that we were looking within, that our library board of trustees reviewed and approved. And that's what we use to look for a site. And so this site fits within those boundaries. And so it's, for some people, they might think it's close to Columbine, but it kind of depends where you live, where you go to where you work or go to school or any of those things, whether or not it's a convenient location, whether or not Columbine is a convenient location and meets the needs of everyone in the community. So this location, we feel, will serve the people living more south and west with a more convenient location.
Great. And then Tom or Donna, it looks like there's definitely people interested in sort of that location selection process. So again, documentation will be provided on the website there, but there's also some interest in understanding what the implications might be on property values. So I'm not sure if that's something that we can respond to tonight or if that's something we'd have to investigate more based on previous projects like this, either in Jefferson County or other communities.
Jay, I'll just answer that briefly here.
Great.
First off, I didn't mention yet that, and somebody mentioned this, that the property was donated to us. That's not accurate. We actually purchased the property for $1.5 million back in 1999. So there was not a donative component of that. Secondly, we can certainly talk more about this at the second meeting, but I would encourage folks to Google studies on property value increases and based on their proximity to public parks and libraries. There's a lot of studies out there, and I would defer to those to answer most of that question.
Great, thanks, Tom. So just to there's a lot of great comments and questions coming in, but I just wanted to highlight a few of the things that we're seeing. So it looks like the people who are questioning the need for the library in this location. There's some clarification from some folks, at least, that they're supportive of libraries, but just not in this location. Some people saying that the open spaces should be the priority. That's why they maybe moved to this area, moved to Colorado in general in some cases. A question about who we're serving with this location. So I think that's some information we can definitely kind of come back with. Who is that kind of local population that would be served? Again, some ideas about the proximity of Columbine, so we can look at that. Tom, I don't know if there's any thoughts that you have. I'm seeing a few things on wildlife habitat. So either around Sledding Hill Park in general, or this sort of southeast portion where likely the library would go as part of this proposal. Any thoughts that you have around wildlife impacts or the habitat itself?
Yeah, thanks, Jay. A couple things on that. The, the highest value areas on this site is the drainage to the north of it. If you think about it, I mean, wildlife need the same things that humans do: food, water, and cover, and that's what that area provides. The more upland areas, particularly the area that is adjacent to Kipling and Ken Carroll, has the lowest wildlife habitat value on this entire site. Between the slope and its proximity to roads, et cetera, even for prairie dogs, it's not the safest site with the opportunity to run out and on the roadways and unfortunately becoming roadkill. So I'll leave it at that for now, Jay.
Yeah, so a few people I think have said that they're interested in making improvements to the Sledding Hill Park without the library addition. So the idea of bathroom facilities, maybe improved parking, and not including the library. Some concerns about flooding. And again, I mentioned that earlier, the pervious or impervious surfaces, excuse me, that'd be created by the library and what those impacts might be on the adjacent roadways, particularly Kipling, I think was mentioned. Looking at other traffic concerns, I guess I'm curious from Donna or Tom. I'm guessing because this is really just a site kind of selection proposal at this point, we don't quite know what potential impacts on the traffic would be. Is that something we would have to look at moving forward, or do we have some insight today on that?
Jay, that would come in future phases where the library would need to do traffic studies. We need to do drainage studies. All of those kind of things would be required as part of developing any kind of library at this location. And there is a due diligence period that we've identified for the library to do that work over a 12-month period. And if they were not able to meet those criteria, et cetera, they would likely not proceed.
Okay, great, thank you. Someone actually mentioned if the library to be built, really thinking about the orientation of the building and thinking about the impacts on the surrounding neighborhood based on light that it might emit. and that sort of thing. But also looking at and seems to be in support of some of the amenities that could be created with the library. I think one of the other things that people have mentioned is that, or general support for more park-like amenities as a part of any improvements that we made to the property. Again, concerns about impacts on wildlife. There's some discussions about schools and the relationship with schools, either using a school that has been closed or pairing a library with the schools. I don't know, Donna, if that was part of the evaluation process and looking at different properties. You said you worked with a commercial broker, so just curious if that was anything that was investigated.
Yes, we have spent several years looking across this part of the county for either a building to repurpose or and once we exhausted that search, which again, using every contact we had and using the resources of a commercial realtor and bringing that information to our board, and then moving on to is there a property that might, where we could build. So we've definitely looked at that. We are in conversation with everybody that we know in the community about what's available. And this is the site that we felt, and we're asking the question of the community, is this a site, then is this something to create a year-round amenity that serves people with library services year-round in addition to the sledding, if this is something they'd be interested in. But yes, we have done that.
Great, thank you, Donna. And then I want to acknowledge there seems to be sort of mixed feelings or at least amongst our attendees about libraries in general. Some people are big fans of libraries, using them quite extensively, and saying that for a variety of reasons, not wanting to take up space. It looks like cost is another consideration. They're using libraries a lot, and then other people are saying that especially with the pandemic, people are staying at home and not really utilizing those services. So definitely something that we can try to provide more information on, and sort of existing usage, as it seems that the opinions are all over the map there. Someone said libraries are always too noisy. That's interesting. You're supposed to be really quiet in the library, I feel like. So that's funny. Let's see, we have a couple other comments about the pandemic really kind of changing things.
Yeah.
Some thoughts about millennials and Gen Z, maybe not using the library. I don't know, Donna, if you have any sort of evidence of that at this point.
Yeah. So Jay, I wonder if I could just share that again, we have ample evidence of the community's use of the library. And if people want more data on that, we certainly can do a deep data dive. We do it all the time with our library board of trustees. We have an annual report that shows at the end of every year that shows how people are using the library. I think people who aren't using the library might not understand how all ages and stages of life use the library, use our libraries. They do. We're talking about 130,000 people who are living down in what this whole entire region being served by the Columbine Library. And so there are some number of people who don't use the library, but so many do. There's so many other things that people do in the library. They use the books. They use the books and materials. They come for the study rooms. They use the computers. They get together with people. They work from home at the library. All those things. So we can see when we go through the chat and think about what we want to bring back, see how we can answer this question for people who don't see the value in the library for the future, and show that there is library use now. It's growing again from the pandemic. We are back on track. people are using the library again more, and we anticipate that will continue to grow. So I will have to think about what kind of response we can give for people who have that question or concern, or impression.
Great, thanks, Donna. Yeah, there's a couple of people who are curious about the process, and wondering, if voices are being heard. What is this? Is this just checking the box, having this type of conversation? And I'll just reiterate, the conversations I've been part of in preparation for this meeting, moving forward with our next meeting in about a month. The idea is to understand what the concerns are, come up with ideas, solutions to address as many of those concerns as possible, and then have further community conversation. And again, the decision is definitely not made at this point. So a few other things people are questioning, sort of that underserved. What do we mean by that? And I don't know, Donna, if there's anything more you can say at this point to clarify, or if that's something that we could direct people to the resources that'll be online, and maybe we can provide a little further clarification in the next meeting. Anything else you'd want to say on that piece? It seems to be a common theme, kind of questioning this idea of underserved.
Yes, with the people attending today, yes, that's is a theme that's coming up. It's for us. I think I've answered it well today, and we'll see if there's something else we can bring back that has more. Has some other information for us. It is around the size of the population, and that shows a need for a new branch. We have our facility master plan that's on our website that might help people who want to do a deeper dive into where some of that data comes from. Maybe we'll point to some of our other board meetings where our board, we engaged our board with the conversation. Some of those things, we'll have to see what will help people understand our the need for this library in this part of the community.
Great, thanks, Donna. Tom, I don't know if you can speak maybe to, I mentioned it a little earlier, but I've seen a couple more things coming in the chat. That idea of kind of the slippery slope. If we, there's 6 acres now for a library, what would prevent, I think there's mention of what about a Starbucks, and what about developing the entire 29 acres here, and what does that mean for other open space in the system?
Well, thanks, Jay. I really appreciate the concern and the sentiment about preserving open space. That's the business we're in. We are buying open space and parkland all the time. We've added lots of acres to our system over time, and we understand that people, when we purchase property for open space parkland, folks expect it to be that in perpetuity, and we take that really seriously. And we, as I said earlier, we only consider proposals that have significant benefit to Jefferson County open space or the community, with public community facilities. So things like Starbucks or Walgreens or any kind of gas station or something, those are not things that we would ever consider for a land transfer. They all serve the community, but not as a public entity for public purposes. The other thing that I just want to point out is that folks talk a lot about losing open space. Some of the properties that you might be referencing are private properties that have zoning and land entitlements on them. Those properties are often difficult for us to acquire because the cost is so high. So while they might be open, they're not necessarily permanently open space unless they are protected by someone like us or Foothills or Ken Carroll or another conservation organization like ours.
Great, thanks, Tom. So I did want to again acknowledge, and this is probably something that we'll have to kind of respond to in the next meeting or online, but some concerns about wildlife, different types of species, even some that are in pretty close proximity to, where the library improvements, whether it be the building or adjacent improvements, would be located. So I think that's something that we can investigate further and come back with. Quite a few ideas of sort of not necessarily saying that we don't need a new library, but why this location, would there be a way to look at a closed school? So again, I think something that we can bring some of that documentation, some highlights in the next meeting, and even highlight some of those that are already, some of that documentation is available on the website. Let's see. Again, looking at other locations, some questions about the soils. I don't know if, Tom, if you know anything about there's specifically a question about the expansive soils on the site. Is there anything, any information that you have on that right now?
I don't have any information on that. I don't know if Donna can answer that. If the library's done any initial testing, I don't believe so.
No, that would be getting ahead of this process. We wouldn't do that. That would be part of due diligence, but we have not done that yet.
Great, thank you both. Yeah, so yeah, some questions about environmental impact study. So that would be it sounds like a next step, assuming that we would move forward with something along the lines of this proposal. Again, looking at board trustees, thinking about the existing building. Oh, sort of this emphasis on an existing building. So definitely, I think that's a theme that we're hearing is why not an existing building? So again, we'll be able to respond better to that, I think, in the next meeting. People live here for the open space. I think that is a theme that we're hearing across the board. So I think in response to that, and again, sort of looking at how this proposal could respond to that, what would this look like? What would some of those improvements be? What would the potential impacts be on the views and that sort of thing? Are definitely things that we can dig further into and provide more information on. Now knowing what those concerns are. There are already roads and sidewalks to this location, so people are saying that the trail and connectivity might not be necessary. So that may be true to get to the library itself, but I think, Tom, I don't know if you have any data on that, but maybe you can just speak to, I think I'm not misspeaking by saying that trails are some of the most popular amenities in Jefferson County open spaces generally. Is that true?
That's absolutely true, and that's been proven time and again with our random sample scientific residence survey that we do every 5 years. The thing that folks want us to do most is preserve land and build trails, and we actually have several programs designed around incentivizing local jurisdictions to do that. Our Land Conservation and Trails Partnership program. So definitely those are popular. Folks love trails, and they serve a lot of people for a lot of different uses.
Great, thank you.
Um,
Go ahead,
Jake,
Tom.
I'm just looking at some of the things that keep popping up in the chat that we haven't talked about, and that's
Yeah, go for it.
the unhoused and
Mm-hmm.
how this site may or may not attract the unhoused. So wondered if we could just take a couple of minutes on that topic.
Yeah, that'd be great. We're hearing some concerns about that libraries might attract homeless. There's some concerns about the proximity. If that were to be the case, then the sledding hill and the sledding amenities being kind of family oriented and sort of the undesirable mixing of the two. So yeah, I don't know if Donna, you have any insights from the other libraries in the system. That would be great to speak to.
Yes, I don't have a concern for that in this area. We don't see that as a problem in most of our libraries in terms of people's behavior. We address behavior as it becomes an issue. We take safety and security seriously. I don't see this as a concern that we're looking at, but hearing that the community has a concern for it, we'll see if there's a way that we can speak to that at the next meeting, that if that seems to be a common concern from people.
Great, thank you, Donna. Yeah, I think we were definitely hearing several. Tom, did you want to add something there too?
Yeah, I'll just add that I know that our human services team works extensively with both the nonprofit and the faith-based community to address this really huge challenge that we have throughout our region, throughout our country. Unfortunately, it's complex, and we have a team of experts at the county and again in those faith-based and nonprofit organizations that are working on this. I'll just echo what Donna says. We do have some folks that are unhoused trying to establish in some of the open space properties that we own. We certainly address those very promptly upon being aware of them, and do that in as sensitive a way as we can. After all, we're talking about humans here that probably have a really tough set of circumstances.
Great, thank you, Tom. So we have about 5 minutes remaining. We just saw that on the top of the screen as well. I wanted to acknowledge there's some additional traffic concerns. I think some people thinking about safety of particularly left-hand turns, thinking about where access would be to the site, where that makes sense based on existing lights, signals, so on and so forth. So something we can look at moving forward. Again, a lot of questions about other locations that were studied. So again, we'll make that available, that information available on the website and bring that to the next meeting. And I guess just to reiterate, I think I'm seeing a little bit of frustration. People are saying that their questions aren't being addressed. We're trying to hit as many as possible, of course. We will definitely, sort of, as I said, we're going to download all of the chat messages after this, and we're going to sort of group those into key themes and provide answers to those on the website. And then we're going to do another meeting, of course, as well. We're going to try to hit a few more here, but please be patient with us. We're not trying to avoid answering the questions. We just have certain information this evening. We want to hear as much from you tonight, and then we'll be responding to those as appropriate. A few other things, thinking about different aspects of the demographics of the library and who it will serve. So that's something that we'll be looking at. We want to look at, I guess, I'm seeing a lot of different kind of varied support for the library, both in this location and an additional library not in this location, and for Columbine Library and it getting improvements. I think some people saying instead of, but some people are saying in addition to. So we'll have to sort of look at all of those inputs as well. And we do have one more polling question for you all as well. I'm just doing a quick scan to see if there's anything else here, kind of new ideas, new themes. All right, I think we're hearing, or we've kind of articulated at least the big things. So traffic being a big concern, the loss of open space being another one, the idea of impacts of that building So it could be views. I think we heard a bit on drainage, thinking about impervious surfaces, potential flooding. We heard about some different aspects of really the concern about the proximity of the library, wanting to know more information on the need for the library, and who it will be serving. In fact, I think we just a few minutes ago hit on the homelessness issue, and if the excuse me library will be drawing homeless to this area. Other thoughts about that slippery slope idea of if we're improving a portion of the open space or developing a portion of the open space, what prevents us from developing more of that? And then really just I think most folks wanting a better understanding of how we got to the point that we're at right now with this proposal for this site. So documenting the need for the library, and sort of that selection process that was undertaken that Donna mentioned. So we'll do our best to capture as many of those ideas or sort of responses as possible. So with that, we wanted to repeat that last Mentimeter question, see if any of the responses that Donna and Tom were able to provide would hit any of that. But before we do that, we have the next virtual meeting is going to be on September 28th, so just about a month out from now. Again, we'll summarize the feedback that we heard this evening. We're also going to do that on the website, as I mentioned. So that's website is at the bottom of the screen there. https://www.jeffco.us/1585/plans-projects. Again, at that second community meeting, we also will be working on addressing as many of the comments, having responses, anything that we were unable to respond to tonight. Either we didn't have the information, didn't have the time, and then looking at a draft concept plan, which I think will address a lot of the concerns, or at least provide some insight to many of the concerns, and see if in fact those are still concerns that you all have. So we are just about at time currently. So if you can go forward to that last question, Chris. So again, we answered this one time already. Anyone who's still with us, we'd love to kind of check it one more time, see if anything shifted through the course of this meeting. So given what you've learned and heard, what are your hopes relative to the proposal? Again, that it happens, becomes an incredible community amenity, you're undecided, or you really don't want it to happen, and the park stays as is. All right, so we have about 47, 48 people. We were up to about 70 previously. I know we're right at the end of our meeting, so a few people may have actually checked out already, but we'll just give it another moment or two. And as we're waiting, I just want to thank everyone for their time this evening. I know that it can be tough sometimes to carve out time in your day or your evening for something like this, so we really appreciate you participating. We really appreciate all the different comments, positive, negative. We really need to hear all of that from the community. Again, this is one input of many, so we'll be soliciting input from your neighbors, from your friends. The website is going to be kind of the main piece of that, but trying to get as much input as we can before that next community meeting coming up in later September. So it looks like we're leveling out about 62 people here. So if you want to reveal the results. Okay, so some people I think checked out. I think we were at about 70 before, maybe 72, but it looks like pretty even split with folks thinking that it should happen, and it becomes a great or incredible, I guess we say, community amenity. One more person on the other end of the spectrum, 31, it doesn't happen, and park stays as is. Oh, someone somehow just level that out with 31 apiece. But then we have two in the middle, undecided. So it seems as though a few people maybe were swayed one way or the other. I think we had quite a few more undecided mid-meeting, but again, acknowledging this is one piece of our input, and I think several folks didn't respond that responded earlier in the meeting. So again, thank you all so much for your time. We really appreciate it. Tom or Don, anything that you guys want to say in closing?
I just want to thank everybody for attending tonight, for your respectful comments. It's good community dialogue to understand the issues and what would need to be addressed to move ahead here. So thank you very much for coming tonight.
I would echo Tom's sentiments. Thanks for being here, and thanks for letting us hear your ideas and questions and respond as we could today, so we can respond again in a month with a little bit more information about people's areas of interest.
Great. Thanks all. Have a good evening.